Welcome back to my cautionary tale of trying to turn this DIY dining table into something like this. And let's face it, any project that kicks off by finally making use of that weird soup no one actually eats from the back of the cupboard is clearly off to a promising start. And of course, what DIY job doesn't begin with a cheeky rub down? You know, just to prep for the good stuff. Now I have already primed this table, but let's be real, I don't trust life not to rip me a new one in the most creative and inconvenient way possible. Sure, my approach to health and safety is, well, let's call it flexible. But when it comes to slavering cement on MDF, apparently I'm a better safe than sorry kind of girl with a bonus layer of primer for emotional support. Speaking of safety, this was also the point I decided to change into something slightly more appropriate and with less chance of getting concrete on my nips, because honestly that's just a little too 50 shades of grey for me. Now, as a self-proclaimed black belt in creative filling and sanding, also known as pretending I'm a plasterer, smothering the Microcement base coat on my table was right up my street, because who wouldn't take comfort in knowing that no matter how badly I mess this up, a bit of cheap sandpaper and a strong sense of denial can fix everything. It's the DIY equivalent of damage control Meghan Markle's PR team wishes they had. So this is what we'll be working with in 6 hours time once everything's dried and hopefully hasn't cracked out or spite. In the meantime, I'm fairly certain I got more Microcement on myself than the actual table. Welcome back to everyone's favourite table drama, where I take a cryptic doodle, ignore obvious red flags, and somehow end up with a concrete style dining table I could never afford. Because let's face it, if I had £2 lying around, I'd be horizontal on a beach, not inhaling MDF dust like it's a Friday night with a spoon. And today my brain decided to paint the underside of my table, fully committing to pointless perfection that only I will appreciate. Because clearly turning my living room into a DIY assault course, while 3 of my kids are spotty, itchy and feral with chickenpox, was a flawless life choice. It's like the floor is lava meets a biohazard training drill. But knowing my luck, if I painted it after doing the Microcement, I'd splash it everywhere and ruin the whole thing. And frankly, I don't have the emotional stability to survive that kind of trauma. So after a second layer of Microcement, my cylinder base was thankfully looking less like a geometric car crash. Sanded, of course, is my own personal form of hell. Something a smarter person might have considered before starting this DIY project. But for some reason, I convinced myself that sanding would be less messy by hand. But once I realised it required actual physical effort, I surrendered to the electric sander because life's too short for unnecessary suffering. Plus, the electric sander really adds that element of danger I like to bring to all my home reno projects. Nothing screams competent adult quite like discovering I can flinch faster than the sander can launch a disc at my eye. But at least my table is starting to resemble the inspo picture. Welcome back to part 3 of the DIY dining table saga no one asked for, but we're all emotionally invested in anyway, where I'm attempting to build my own version of this £2,000 table because financial freedom doesn't leave much room for character building. Plus, I promise people I'd buy them a Costa coffee if I don't get this table finished in the next 5 days. So really, what choice do I have? And today's mission, priming and microcementing the tabletop while accidentally basting Peppa Pig in Microcement and whatever else gets in the way. Now, considering I'm a drastically impatient person, this feels less like a DIY project and more like an emotional stress test conducted under military conditions. My tabletop needs 6 hours of uninterrupted drying time, and I'm trapped inside with 4-minute dictators, 3 of whom are riddled with the chickenpox and seem to think boundaries are either fictional or just a personal dare. Now, opting to use a paintbrush over my roller to microcement the sides of my table was the most genius idea I've had all day, because apparently holding the trowel steadily against a small flat edge is a skill I don't possess. But here's my tabletop after I've slapped on the first layer of microcement compared to the second. Don't ask me why, but it always goes on so much easier. I also stand by my statement that sanding by hand makes way less mess, or at least a more contained mess. But here we are, base coat complete, and I'm like a 5-year-old at Christmas. I actually can't believe I'm pulling this off, so don't forget to like and follow for part 4.